All right, hi Scott. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today is April 14th, 2013, and we're here to discuss religion and more specifically Islam and your interpretation of it. I just want to go over two quick things before we get our discussion started. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, we'll be uploading this video to YouTube, to the internet. Is that okay with you?
Yes, mate. 2 seconds.
You got it.
I'm back.
Great. So are you fine with us uploading this video to the internet after it's done?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we are all about our discussions staying both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone who were to join this chat room once we get started. Are you fine with that ground rule as well?
Yes.
All right, great. So then let's get our conversation started. For anyone who's going to end up watching this video in the future, or for anyone who's in the room right now, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself, Scott, who you are and why you're so passionate about this topic?
Yeah. Okay. My name's Scott. You just disappeared, mate.
Yeah, I'm right here. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm 37 years old. I am ex-army. I was in the Australian Army for 11 years. After that, I had various other jobs. Like I was a personal trainer, and I was a bouncer, and I worked at a prison for 4.5 years as well. You asked why I'm so passionate about this subject. I've actually asked myself that question many times, and I've tried to put my finger on where it first actually started. And I think it was actually at 9/11 when that happened. I remember a speech afterwards by George Bush, and he said that the people who perpetrated those attacks were traitors to their faith. And at the time, I didn't know anything about Islam, and to tell you the truth, I wish I still didn't. But I just took that hook, line, and sinker. I believe, okay, Islam's supposedly a peaceful religion, then they are traitors to their faith. But as I said, I was in the army for 11 years, and I served in two tours of duty. One was in East Timor against Muslims. The other one was in Iraq against Muslims. So you get to learn a little bit about their religion, or I like to call it a cult more than a religion, during that time. And when I got back, I want to be clear, I'm not a scholar. I'm not an expert on Islam. I'm not an expert on any religion. I'm just an average, ordinary, everyday Aussie bloke who is sick to death of reading the newspapers and reading about some bloody Muslim who has cut off someone's head, or suicide bombed, or set up a car bomb, or genital mutilation, or honour killing, etc., etc., etc. I mean, what's more disturbing to me is, because I've researched this quite a bit over the last few years, it seems to be like there's a fear amongst the average people in Western societies to even say anything about it because they're afraid that they're going to get called a racist. What defies my belief is, how can they be called a racist when Islam is not a race, it's a religion? You've got black Muslims, white Muslims, brown Muslims. Okay, so why do we keep getting the stigma of being called a racist simply because we're speaking out against an ideology which is responsible for 270 million deaths since its inception in the 7th century? Not only that, we've had tolerance crammed down our throats in Western societies for as long as I can remember. Tolerance of other people's beliefs and cultures, and in most cases that's actually a good thing, but not in regard to Islam, because we are so afraid to even tell the truth about this bloody religion, and it's got to stop. People need to start growing some balls and telling the truth, because the biggest enemy to Islam is the truth. For example, what I mean by that Islam wouldn't exist in Western countries, and people would be a lot less tolerant of it if they knew that there's been 20,000 Islamic atrocities in the past 10 years. I mean, think about that number. That's 5.5 atrocities per day. Okay? They would be a lot less tolerant of it if they knew that the person who started Islam, Muhammad, was a pedophile. There's many contemporary sources, it's even in their own holy books, that this man married a 6-year-old. He had in between 9 and 13 wives. He married a 6-year-old, and he consummated the marriage at 9. Okay, I mean, everyone knows about the Bali bombings. They know about 9/11, the London and Madrid train bombings, the Beslan school massacre, the Mumbai hotel massacre, the Russian airport massacre. You know, we hear about these atrocities because the people that were killed were in the hundreds. What you don't hear about is all the little atrocities that happen every single day. For example, what's today, the 14th? Yesterday in Pakistan, 9 people were killed, 19 people were injured. And women were amongst these people by the Mujahideen. In Mali, at least 3 people were killed by a suicide bomb on the same day. Yes, I'm guaranteed that no one that is watching this website right now heard anything about these atrocities. And that's just where I stand on it.
Right. Joanne, do you want to just lower your music or whatever that is in the background? Did you have anything that you wanted to bring up, or did you just want to, join in on this discussion to take part in it?
I'll join in now and again because I know there have been a lot of atrocities by Muslims, but it's been done Muslim on Muslim too. I mean, look at what's happening in Syria. Look at what's happening in Palestine, places like that. And I've got some really, really terrific friends who are Muslims, and it's not the general Muslim population that are doing these atrocities. It's a minority, hardcore, extremist section of the Muslims that are doing this. And Muslims are just as much victims as what some of the Westerners have been. And, I know with the work I've been doing over the last 10 years with refugees, I know just how much Muslims themselves have suffered and are still suffering dreadfully.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. If you look up the statistics of the atrocities that I was talking about, the 20,000 atrocities that have happened in the past 10 years, more than half of those atrocities have been perpetrated by Muslims against other fellow Muslims for being the wrong type of Muslim. And and I'm the first to admit, I've met lovely Muslim people, okay? No one is denying that there are a lot of lovely Muslim people. They're law-abiding, they're peaceful, etc., etc. But, and this is a very big but, I question the mindset of anyone who believes that a 7th century pedophile, mass-murdering thief, like the list of atrocities that this man committed is very, very long. Now, I question these peaceful, moderate Muslims' mindset if they think that this man was the perfect example to mankind.
Right.
Well, with Aisha, yes, he took her as a bride when she was 6. He'd been married a long time to his first wife, and she died. And he never took 2 or 3 wives at the same time. Aisha was put into his home, and she was taught what she would have to, wifely duties. And he didn't take her till she was much older. There is some dispute on the actual age when the marriage was consummated. From what I gather, it was more like 13 or 14. But she was a favoured wife. She was the love of his life. He really treated her like a queen. She was powerful, and she continued to be powerful after he died. She didn't have the oppression that a lot of Muslim women suffer today. I wouldn't call him a pedophile because at that time they were considered to be women at 9. In fact, in Iran, they still consider that, and some of the clerics there are saying that they should let their girls marry at 9, which I think it's outrageous in the 21st century. But looking back at that time, so many centuries ago, when people didn't live long anyway, I wouldn't say you could pedophile.
No, I've heard these arguments before.
Yeah. In today's world, it would be considered that, but not back then.
No, you're absolutely right, and I've actually heard these arguments before, that times were different back then. There was no moral standard that he could have been judged against that would have, he wouldn't have even been labelled a pedophile. A pedophile didn't even exist back then. He wasn't the first person to have a child as a wife, and he wasn't the last either. However, this man is considered by Muslims, if he's a holy prophet of God, would you not expect him to know better than to have sex with a small child? And the pedophilia aspect is only one of the bloody deeds that we find unpalatable these days. He beheaded 800 people from the Benue Kureza tribe in a single day. Took them as captives, and then he exiled all the women and children out of the place where they were staying. Think about that number. 800 people had their heads cut off after they surrendered. He was robbing Meccan caravans. He ordered political assassinations. Okay? And then on his deathbed, before he died, he launched 65 wars to spread his religion. No other religion does this.
I can only speak from the Muslims I know, and from how they think, I know they put their religion comes first. I've told them, with me, my family comes first and foremost of my family and their well-being. My country comes second, yeah. And religion I consider to be private, then I keep that third.
No, yeah. We've got that in common. I believe religion should be kept private. Unless people want to talk about it, then I'm open. I class myself as a Christian. Most of my friends are all atheists or agnostics. They don't really care about religion.
And don't we have some arguments with them?
Yeah, I've had a field day. But I don't push my religion on anybody. To tell you the truth, I'm not exactly the best example of a Christian. I drink, I smoke, I swear like bloody trooper.
You're an Australian.
What I'm finding very disturbing is what I was talking about. The people are afraid to actually tell the truth. And then Muslims, there's a big challenge there should be a big challenge in the Muslim world to start, accepting the truth. I mean, like you said, there was a bit of dispute about Aisha's age. There's no dispute. It's plainly written in the bloody Bukhari and the Quran. He was married at 6 and consummated at 9, and there are many other sources that you can get your information for on this. And Muslim scholars today, it's quite embarrassing for them. They tiptoe around the issue, and like these nice Muslims that we've all met, okay, their true nature comes out over the internet when they're typing away and nobody can actually see them. Like I said, I've met plenty of nice Muslims, okay, but the amount of times I've had death threats over the internet for telling the truth, I've lost count of. Okay? It's got to. And if we continue to be silent on this issue and stop confronting our friends that are Muslims and telling them the truth, and then they still choose to bloody worship a pedophile, then as far as I'm concerned, these so-called peaceful, moderate Muslims, they're all screwed in the head.
Well, most of my friends are Muslim, not screwed in the head. Yes, they're devout to their religion, but they're also good people. And they respect, most of my friends are married, they respect their wives, they respect their children, they don't believe in this 2, 3, 4 wives business. And, they seem to be more modern in their outlook on life. And, they treat me like a queen, they really do. And, a lot of them call me mother.
Well,
it's been a real honour.
So do you guys, think that there's a division of certain Muslims who you're worried about, Scott, and then there are those that Joanne says have kind of not fallen into this certain sect of Muslims.
Sorry, you're breaking up a bit, mate. You're cutting in and out.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're all right to me, Max.
Yeah, I was going to say, so do you guys think that there is, what do you think exactly has happened? There's a certain group of Muslims that have, that are kind of classified as a certain division, of the type that you're worried about, Scott, while others have sort of you know um, you know have not fallen into this division of Muslims that concern you, and those are the ones that Joanne is talking about? Or do you think that all of them are do you think that there could be ultimately a problem with all of them? And can you kind of just go into what exactly you think is going on?
Okay. You can't. It'd be stupid to have a problem with the entire race of Muslim people or the population of Muslim people. There's 1.5 billion of them. Okay. My problem is with the political ideology that is Islam itself. And there's a lot of, like we've established, that the majority of Muslims are peaceful people. However, in World War II, most of the Germans were peaceful people too. That they weren't all Nazis, but look what happened. The Nazis took over, and that's what we see all over the Islamic world, where the extremists get power and they intimidate the majority. And if we continue to let thousands upon thousands of them into Western countries, the same thing eventually is going to happen here. They make it clear in every single street protest and riot that there is. They're holding up signs saying Islam will dominate the world. Behead anyone who insults the Prophet. It's incompatible with our way of life. And even though these peaceful Muslims have assimilated, the challenge to them is look at your own religion. Most people are born into Islam with no clue about it. They're just born into it. Okay, so you can't hold that against them, and I don't hold that against them. But if they've been given enough information, like I've just said there, told you that the Prophet who wrote the Quran was a pedophile, mass murderer, and they still think that he's the perfect example to mankind, then come on, any sane, rational person should have a problem with this, and we should questioning their mindset. And another little thing in Islam is a thing called taqiyya. You would have heard of that. It's basically the lying and deceit tactics that Muslims use. A good example of this was in Muhammad himself. His band arrived in Medina in 622, and they were completely dependent on the Jewish tribes that lived there. Within 2 years, after he'd gained enough power, these two or two tribes were gone. The third one, they were exiled from the community. The third one was the Banu Qurayza tribe, and we know what I said before happened to them. They had their heads cut off and they were exiled as well. And this is what Islam does. It conquers. It's not a peaceful religion. It never has been. And we need to stop avoiding this issue and start focusing on the real issue, which is the ideology of Islam itself.
I think a good thing that's happening today is the number of young Muslims that go to Western countries for education. And education is the answer, I think, because once they see that what they're taught about the West isn't true, they think of, they call Americans Satan. And of course it's not Satan, and there's so many students in America, and they're seeing the way of life there. Obviously, the more conservative of the Muslims won't approve of the way a lot of the women dress. But apart from that, they don't often see anything that's bad for for them. And I talk to students, and I've got refugees that have gone to America, and they've seen the difference between what they've come from and some of the bad things that happen in Islam, and they see what it's like in other countries, and they can then form an opinion. I think this has been the trouble for a long time. It's getting the knowledge through to Westerners as well, because Westerners all have one idea about Arab people in general and Muslims, and it's not necessarily true, and they don't try to find out where the good part is. And I often sit for hours with Muslim friends, and I talk to them, and I talk to them about, they say, well, why do Westerners think this? Why do Westerners think that? Why are they against? It's one thing they bring up off the hijab. You've got nuns that said that wear a similar headdress. Why is it our women can't wear the hijab? And I'll say, well, the nuns are not forced to wear a hijab. It's a dress that's like a uniform. But I said today, modern day nuns, many of them do not wear of clothing. They're nurses, they're teachers, and they wear Western, just ordinary dress to a lot of their employment. And I just think, I say about the children, it annoys me. I'm not bothered at all if a woman wants to wear the hijab. She has the freedom of choice. But when they're taught from being about 3 and 4 year old, you see them in hijabs, some of them even in a burqa at that age, then that is wrong, because they're not growing up with that freedom of choice. All they see that is the thing to do, and they think it's so terrible to see a woman with her arms there and her head. Yeah, and so if you try talking to the Muslims and saying, well, give the women freedom of choice. Don't force them to do something because you think this is right. What's wrong with a woman having bare arms? What's wrong with having her hair uncovered?
What?
Why should it make your men go crazy? I said, look, come on. I make it light-hearted because I don't want to appear that I'm being abusive to them, and I can usually get my way with them. And we have some really fun discussions on the aspect of Muslims.
So just quickly, Scott, before you respond to that, which I definitely want to hear your response, but can you guys talk about something that Joanne brought up, which is potentially a misunderstanding by Westerners, the Western world about, Muslims? Like, you want to think that since, let's say, September 11th, like, they've been given a bad rap, right? And it's been kind of, I feel like probably a lot of Muslims think that those 1.5 billion people have probably felt like they're classified as one group of, harmful individuals. So can you kind of maybe discuss that concept after you respond, Scott?
Okay. What Joan was saying about the nuns, and I agree with everything she just said, actually. But with the nuns, they are almost the heads of the Catholic religion, I believe. Not all Catholics have to wear the nun outfit. Even, like you said, the nuns don't have to wear it. With regards to the post 9/11 bad rap that the Muslims have copped, it's Islam itself that has copped the bad rap, and they haven't copped even 1/100th of the bad rap that they deserve. As a matter of fact, there's a massive media silence on the issue. I am yet to see, I don't know what it's like over there in America, but I am yet to see any major news network, or any journalist for that matter, here in Australia, say what I have just said then, the truth. Say that Muhammad was a pedophile. Say that there has been 20,000 Islamic atrocities in the past 10 years. I mean, have you ever seen someone get their head cut off? Like, there's plenty of video footage of it on the internet, and it is disgusting and it's gross. And it happens almost every day. Okay? Now, we're not getting told the truth, and I am gobsmacked that every single social gathering or work gathering I've been to, and I talk to people and I tell them this, they don't know. They've got no idea, and we would be a lot less tolerant of this religion if they knew the truth. And you would have heard of Geert Wilders, the Dutch politician who speaks out against Islam. He recently came over to Australia a month and a half ago. He was met with fierce protests and debates. And from what I've seen of this man, all he does is tell the truth about Islam. And for the last 10 years, he has been under 24/7 protection because of the thousands of death threats that he receives simply for telling the truth. And yet these cowardly, spineless snakes in politics turn around and call him an extremist. When he speaks out against extremists, and he gets death threats from extremists. And it doesn't make sense to me, like the world that we're living in.
What was this individual's name, Scott, again?
Geert Wilders. He's a Dutch politician.
I'm part Dutch. And my family are disgusted with him. He's like the English Defence League over here. You see the English Defence League over here? They're spouting anti-Muslim rhetoric all the time. And it did stem from a very bad time. When our troops get killed in Afghanistan, they're brought to an air base, a military one, Rise Norton, and they have to go through this little village. And every time they bring one of these boys back, there's always the streets are lined with people and the relatives, and they're throwing flowers onto the hearse. But very early on, there was a group of extremists, and boy were they vicious, and they were shouting that these boys were baby killers and deserved to burn in hell. And from that, English Defence League.
Anjem Chowdhury was one of the extremist Muslims. Oh, yeah, I know all about him.
Yeah. Thing is that
I personally believe
we've got problems here. We can't even deport these horrific extremists. We've got one now that we've been trying to deport to Jordan because he was involved in the bombing of a wedding party. Most of the wedding party were killed, and the European Union won't let us deport him back to his trial in Jordan. They say he won't get a fair trial. Did he give those people a fair trial?
No.
See what you mean, because you've got these extremists that do these terrible things. But one thing I do know is that in the UK there are now a lot of Muslims who are speaking against these killers and these.
I don't see that.
That's what you need.
I don't see I'm not sure about England. I've actually never been there. But the day I see thousands of Muslims take to the streets and start protesting against these bastard extremists, that's the day I'll stop doing what I'm doing. But you don't see it.
They do here, and some of the clerics. But you've got some of the clerics that's a part and parcel of the trouble. We had the London bombings. These were Pakistani originally, but they were born in this country, educated in this country. How on earth did they get radicalised when they're brought up, to everything that they would not have got in their own country? They go to a mosque, they start to get radicalised there, then they're sent to Pakistan or Afghanistan to the madrasas, and they're taught how to make bombs and to be suicide bombers. Then they came back to England and they did just that. And there's even been some since. Luckily for us, there's been good intelligence, and we've found the bombs and we found the bombers, and it's been stopped. But this is intel from the Muslim community, so they are helping. I wish there'd be a little bit more. As you say, you want more and more coming forward like that. Say, this is wrong, this is not Islam.
That's all well and good, and I'm glad to hear that actually is happening. But when you said you don't know how they're getting radicalised, I can answer that question, how they're getting radicalised. This thing here. There's 109 direct orders in there to wage war, persecute, and kill the infidel. It doesn't. If you believe that a holy God has ordered Muslims to do that, then you're going to question. It doesn't make sense to me, because if God created everything, why would He want one of His creations to kill another one of His creations? It's what goes through these people's head.
Also in the Quran, it does say that they should take care of the people of the book, i.e. the Jews and the Christians. And also it said, if you hurt one person, it is that you have hurt the whole of the world. If you do good to one person, you've done good to the whole world. Yeah. So the thing is, there are some clerics have even admitted that there are passages. I don't know which surah they are. Is that I don't read. I mean, I have got a Quran, but I don't go through it thoroughly. But they do say there are certain surahs that you can take in many interpretations, and this is where the evil comes out.
Yeah. The evil comes out because there is a strong dissidence of abrogation in the Quran. Now, what you're talking about is the no compulsion in Islam. That comes from 256 in the Quran. Just give me a second, I'll actually read it out here. What a tolerant, and Muslims often use this no compulsion in Islam to say that it's a peaceful religion. And the verse in part reads, "Let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clearly from error." Now, the truth is, the Muslim who offers this verse may or may not understand that it is from one of the earlier surahs. When Muhammad, he was in the Medinan period, It was revealed at the time when the Muslims had just arrived in Medina after being chased out of Mecca. They needed to stay in good places with the stronger tribes that were around them, many of who were actually Jewish. It was around this time, for example, that Muhammad decided to have his followers change the direction of their prayer from Mecca to Jerusalem. Okay, but later on, or now, Muslims pray facing Mecca, as we all know. The reason for that is what I was talking about before, the abrogation. Muhammad issued a later command that abrogated the first. In fact, the abrogation is a very important principle to keep in mind when interpreting the Quran. In verse 2.256 in particular, is a good example of this. You see what I'm saying? Like, earlier on in Muhammad's career, he was preaching peace and tolerance and acceptance of all people, especially the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. But once he got more power, that's when he changed. And that's what Muslims have been doing for the last 1,400 years. You've only got to look at the percentage of the Muslims in different countries around the world to see this. Like here in Australia and America, I think we're at about 2.5%. I'm not sure what yous are in England. Joan, what are you? About 5 or 6?
No, it was about 3.5%, I think.
Yes, and as what you'll see is, as the Muslim percentage of the population grows in each country, so does the violence and the persecution of non-believers. Take Afghanistan. It's virtually 100% Muslim, and there's no freedom in that place, I can guarantee you. Same as Iraq, and I can use a personal example here. Yeah.
That's why they don't want Taliban.
My brother-in-law is actually a refugee from Iraq, and he's a Christian from Iraq, and he grew up there, and some of the stories he's told me is absolutely horrific. Him and his whole family couldn't even go down to the street to buy a carton of milk without getting the shit kicked out of them by Muslims simply because they were Christians. And the persecution of non-believers happens all over the Islamic world because they have the strength. And here in our country, they don't have the strength yet. That's why you'll hear them preaching tolerance and preaching peace and blah, blah, blah. And they'll be taking victim status at the drop of a hat, screaming racism at the drop of a hat because it suits their cause. That's why I don't want people to go out there and be nasty to Muslims. I never, ever would like that. But I want people in Western society to start realising that the ideology of Islam is very, very dangerous, and we need to be aware. I mean, like I brought up an example before in World War II. Not all the Germans were Nazis, but look what those bastards did.
Right, so just quickly...
Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Right, so just quickly, our Scott, the original individual that I was going to have you speak with, Rick, is inside the chat room. So I think he's going to load his camera shortly to, engage with each of you. And, we'll keep the recording going. And, obviously, you'll just feel free to continue your discussion. And, Rick, if you want to load your camera now, that'd be great. Oh, here he is. Hold on one second. Hey there, Rick. Are you there? Hey, Rick.
Come on, Rick.
I see his box popped up, and I know he doesn't have a camera. He just has audio. Rick, are you there?
I can see his comments.
Yeah. I think I hear him typing.
Yeah, I'm speaking to you, but you cannot hear me?
Now we hear you.
I can hear you.
Good.
All right, great.
All right, Scott.
Right, so just quickly, Rick, what I just wanted to say is maybe, you might just want to introduce yourself quickly, and I'm going to keep the recording going, and I'll let you guys obviously have the floor to continue, but obviously, Rick, the conversation is being recorded, right, and we'll be uploading this video to YouTube, and obviously, we don't want there to be any personal attacks or anything. We want it to be a civil dialogue. So you're fine with both of those, ground rules, right?
Absolutely.
All right, great. So go right ahead. Maybe you'll introduce yourself, and then you guys can continue.
Scott, in introduction, I have been an evangelical Presbyterian Christian here in America. Found how much they were promoting Zionism. And so I have been a Bible blogger since 2006 and working very much in the Islamic community throughout the Middle East. I understand what you're saying, and as I address that, I'm going to be attempting to compare the various religions that are dominating the world today. So if I could ask from you, just as a matter of introduction, what religion would you classify yourself with?
Christian.
Okay. In America, I am dealing with a very militant society. I recently went to a funeral of my uncle, and the chaplain in the military there prayed to the military commander in the sky. Which makes me wonder, as we deal with Islam, how different do you see Islam being from the Torah, where the Israelites were told to go in and basically commit genocide against the Canaanites?
I've got to be honest, I don't know anything about the Torah. I've never read the Torah, and even my Bible knowledge is not that great. What I do know about the Bible most of the violence and the atrocities in the Bible or in the Old Testament, and then Jesus came along, and he's basically, because Christians live by the New Testament, not the Old Testament, and Jesus preached love and forgiveness to all of mankind. He did not teach anyone to go out and kill anybody, whereas that's the difference. Muhammad did. Luke 19:27. Slay them at my feet. I've heard this one before, and that actual quote comes from Luke 19:27. Is that correct? I read that.
And to set a man against his son and a daughter against her mother, etc., which goes into a lot of the historical ideas of in-laws. In-laws brings up that brings the whole Norse mythology into this whole dialect. As we look at Moses and we look at Jesus, and Jesus suddenly is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We have a very family tie here and a whole set of kingdoms on earth. We have a word from Egyptian which is seen in the name of Benjamin Netanyahu. Netan, N-T-N, is from nut, from the Egyptian, and is the word that we use for nation. So as we're dealing with Islam, I want you to look at this in a world scope of national spirits and religious spirits. And although we look at our world and life view and say we're all about peace, the reality of it is the Bible is not about peace. Jesus himself, as the Son of God, he said, I did not come to bring peace. And so we look at Jesus Christ, we say, here's our King and Lord, we're going to get salvation through this. And in America, I am dealing with a Christian church that is all about destroying Islam. So how are we preaching to Islam? By attempting to destroy them, which is exactly the evil that we see in Islam. You understand what I'm saying?
I'd like to respond to that.
Go ahead.
I'd like to respond to that, actually. My understanding of Luke 19:27 is if you go back to Luke 19:11, you can plainly see that Jesus is telling the story about a rich man and his servant, whatever. So he's not ordering us as Christians to come and slay people in front of him. And also, what I'd like to say is this is a common tactic that a lot of Muslims actually use. Every single time we criticize their religion, they straight away make counter accusations about Christianity. My argument to that is it is not just Christians that have a problem with Islam. If you look up the statistics for the 20,000 Islamic terrorist atrocities that have happened in the past 10 years, you'll find Thailand in the last 10 years has got an absolute smashing by Muslims. I think this month there's already been about 10 people killed in Thailand by Muslims. It's not just the Christians that got a problem with it, it's everybody. And Muslims have got a problem with each other. Like you've alluded to, they're killing each other in record numbers all over the planet. They're going on a worldwide bloodthirsty rampage, while people like us sit there and debate about whether or not it's a peaceful religion. It's not a peaceful religion, it never has been. And when it comes to the Christians, all I know is if I'm out there, I think it says in the Old Testament, right, that those who work on Sunday shall be put to death. I can go and wash my car on a Sunday and I don't have Christians lining up to stone me to death. However, you go to an Islamic country and insult the Prophet and see what happens to you.
Is peace a part of the Christian religion, or is it part of human nature?
I think it's part of the peaceful religion because, like you said, Jesus said he did not come to bring, or he came to bring division or the sword or whatever. He wasn't lying. Look what's happened. He didn't say he was. He didn't say that that's what he wanted. He's saying that's what would happen because it would turn people.
Is Christianity is it a peaceful religion?
Yes, I believe it is because
in America,
another example is when Jesus drew the line in the sand, when all those people were about to stone that woman to death for adultery, Jesus drew a line in the sand and said, all of you who are without sin, or any of you who are without sin, throw the first stone. We aren't to judge each other.
Who was on the other side of the line? He drew the line in the sand. There he is with the whore. Mary Magdalene, the wisdom of man. And on the other side, we're dealing with the nation of Israel. There's a dividing line in the sand, just like the dividing wall and hostility that we have today between Israel and Palestine. So I'm giving you a picture here and telling you I don't think that Christianity either is a peaceful religion. Right now, we are out to destroy Islam. We need the world to see that Islam is an evil religion. The idea may be then to convert them to Christianity. I'm going to tell you no, what we are doing is attempting to convert the world to peace. Another place where I have to fight this battle in America is between the Democrats and the Republicans. I live in the religious right in America, which is the Republican Christian right, the righteous people. And Obama, gosh, he's probably a Muslim, even though he says he's a Christian, and he's a black man to boot.
Right.
And if you go to the Republican Party, it's almost white supremacist because it's almost all white people. So we're dealing with a spiritual recognition here of the divisions within the human spirit. And you are correct. You're looking at Islam, and I won't disagree with you that there is all sorts of militant behaviors in Islam. But in meeting Muslims, they're very peace-loving people. And I asked them, have you read the Quran? Well, no. So I will tell you that I agree with you that the Quran itself is filled with militantism. The peace-loving Muslims will say, well, those militant Muslims aren't really Muslims. I say, baloney. It's written right there in the Quran. So as we look at this debate, we have to realize that there is evil also within our own religion. We recognize this through Torah, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and the entire message of Moses, which is revered as holy by Islam, is a bigoted, biased, fascist society that is building a nation to go in and take over an entire land. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is a God that is going to completely overwhelm the world. Just like Christianity wants to completely overwhelm the world, and Islam wants to completely overwhelm the world. So if we want to promote peace and overwhelm the world with peace, which religion shall we choose? My answer is we can't choose a religion. We can't choose God because God's nature comes to us in both the good and the evil. And our tendency is to pick the good as our side, and that side must be evil. Which brings us back to the very beginning of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where we're eating that fruit. So if we're going to talk about Islam being an evil religion, I'm eating some fruit off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and I'm lifting up my own society and bashing my enemy's society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's all well and good, but the difference is the way we are going about getting Christianity or Judaism or whatever across the world. We're not out there cutting off people's heads in record numbers. Can I ask what is your suggestion to actually, if in a perfect world, what would be your suggestion to actually eradicate the evils of Islam and maybe promote your own religion?
I have been forced to step out of the church. I've been forced to step out of being inside a fortress of walls, and to be able to reach out to each individual, realizing throughout the world of Islam, I want to convert as many people. I'm not going to use that word convert. I'm going to recognize those Muslims who are absolutely for peace. There is a university in Pakistan with ambassadors and filled with Muslims who love their religion, but they are all about promoting peace on earth. I don't want to make them Christians. I want to leave them Muslims. As Muslims, I want them to go and talk to other Muslims. I want them to see Jesus Christ being the Son of God. But God is not necessarily a peaceful being. And when that general leader, the chaplain of the Christian military, American military, said, "I'm praying to the military leader in the sky," this is the history of God. So now, what I've stepped away from in studying the books of Enoch, etc., I've stepped away from diabolism. Diabolism is the idea that there is a devil apart from God. Now, if I were to say to you as a believer, in looking at the world as good and evil, if I said to you that the devil nature is completely under the authority of God and used by God to create these divisions and these cells of belief, all these nations on earth. Earth is composed of all these nations with these borders that are fighting against one another. Sure, we have our national spirit, but now we have to break down the walls. And we have to realize that within Islam there are people that also love peace. And now I can treat them as peace lovers and have them recognize Muhammad's militant nature in his book and be honest about it. And say, you know what, those militant Muslims are part of the same national family. But you have to be honest about the evil within your own religion. And then you have to attack it, because the Muslims can heal their religion. I cannot convert them to Christianity because I'm not giving them anything better than what they've already got. But now I have to address the human spirit that desires peace.
I agree with everything you've said. I'm not even going to offer any rebuttals to that. Another thing that we could get actually, before I say, I want to talk about Obama. I don't know much about American politics, but I do believe that he is a Muslim as well. I mean, there's plenty of examples, like, he can recite the Islamic call to prayer verbatim. He grew up in Indonesia. He bowed to the sword king like a little dog. What percentage of Americans actually believe that he's a Muslim?
If you read his book, Audacity of Hope, it is difficult to come away from that and say, oh, that man is a Muslim, not a Christian. He expresses a firm belief in Jesus Christ. He prays with his family. He went to a Christian church. He prays with his family regarding Jesus Christ. He gives a tremendous testimony. The difficulty we have in our, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use a bad word here, righteousness. I'm going to make it 3 words. And you remember Jesus rode the donkey into Jerusalem. Correct? Okay, right assness. We are so confident in our own righteousness that we condemn the other person. The easy thing to do, and I was a Gideon, and I had to leave the Gideon prayer group because on Saturday mornings there was so much Obama bashing, it made me sick. Are there difficulties with the man? Do I agree with all his politics? Absolutely not. But there, I have to address the human spirit. Once I disagree, what am I going to do with my own right-assness? Am I such a right-ass that I'm going to go and destroy this man because he is on the other side of the tracks? He's a black man, I'm a white man. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. He's from Indonesia, he might not even be American, I'm American. We wanted to create a dividing wall of hostility between ourselves. Well, the hostility's already there. So we want to keep the Mexicans out of the United States, just like Israel is trying to keep Palestine out. So here's this political dynamic, and I focus this whole thing back on the Holy Land because that's where God speaks most directly, and especially in the city of Jerusalem, where on top of the holy hill there is a mosque instead of a synagogue today. Israel would like to claim that Jerusalem is their capital and doesn't belong to Islam at all, and they'd like to rip that mosque down. If they rip that mosque down, would we be at World War III? Absolutely.
I heard that I watched some documentary that say when the Antichrist does come, he's actually going to convince them to move it or some crap like that. What's your take?
The Antichrist look at the spirit rather than an individual. When we speak of the Antichrist, you're going to talk about a religion that says our way of worship the only right way. The spirit of Antichrist is against the spirit of humanity. If Jesus Christ, as a body, is representative of the entire human spirit, then I have this dichotomy once again of good and evil within the personality and the psyche of Jesus Christ. So now I can look at that divided wall of hostility between Palestine and Israel and see a left and right side of a brain. I can look at you and I see, okay, you have one mouth, a serpent tongue that can pop back up, but God created you with 2 ears, 2 eyes, a left and a right shoulder, a left and a right hand. And so the body is left and right. And I have to look at the world from the other side's point of view, realizing the evil nature within myself has to force the way I address Islam and say, you know what, I'm as evil as you are. And is this not the message of Jesus Christ and the message of forgiveness?
Maybe so in God's eyes we're all as evil as Muslims, because like it says, if you've broken one of the commandments, you've broken all of them. But not in man's eyes, you're not. Not in my eyes. You're not as evil as someone who has beheaded.
Correct. Why not take on that mindset of God then and realize, you know what, we are all equal. And I have to, when I am treating that religion from my religion, I have to treat us as equals. I have to see that same evil in history. We can go back to the 4th century in Constantine, and he needed to unite the empire. This is history. This is God's story. We were going to unite the empire, but we had the Arian side of the Catholic Church, and we had the Athanasius side of the Catholic Church, and we built this image of the Trinity. And now today we judge the whole world by our image of the Trinity. But then the church, and again in the 16th century when we had the Reformation, the church was at each other's throats. It was so militant. Luther came and he said, I destroyed one pope and I created thousands. And he couldn't stand what had happened through the Reformation. That's Christianity. That ripped Europe apart as we went through the Holocaust, and you had 2 fascist societies. You had the German fascists, and you had the Israeli fascists who declared war against the German fascists in 1932. And then the Holocaust came as the Christian church, basically Christian Europe, was against the Jews who had to get out of there because of the diaspora. So you had this psychology of human nature is always at war with one another as we deal with our lostness. So now I go to the Muslim and I'm able to treat them as a brother and say, I recognize that you want peace. And when they reveal to me that most Muslims do not read the Quran, then I can look at any pastor who is up on a pulpit that is claiming division. And I had to leave my church here in America, 14,000 members strong, Evangelical Presbyterian Church. Man had memorized the New Testament and a lot of the Old Testament. And he said, week in and week out on the pulpit, he says, most Christian scholars agree Jesus Christ came to divide the world. Sorry, that's missing the entire point. The Bible, I can find where most Christian scholars understand that Jesus came to divide the world, but that's the entire nature of God. God divides us like a body of cells constantly dividing. But how is the body going to function if there is not some brain that tells all these divided cells, look, we have to work together for peace? And I can't call that a religion, because religion is about worshiping something. It's peace act.
It's a bit hard, though, when the political aspects of Islam come into it. I mean, it's all well and good to preach tolerance to the Muslims, but you can't do that where Muslims have a majority. Like, if you go over to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan and start preaching, tolerance of all beliefs and cultures over there, how long do you think you're going to last?
Correct. So instead of asking for tolerance for my belief, why even mention my belief? If I were to say I'm a Muslim, am I going to hell? Or if I don't even mention religion, but I go to them and I only speak peace, because the people within the faith want peace. And the militant nature, if I go and I speak to the militant Muslim, they say, hey, it's all about first blood. If you attack me, I have every right to attack you. If you oppress my house, my book says that I can destroy you, but first you oppressed me. So I go after that, and I understand their mindset and their desire for peace. The entire reason we take up our guns is to protect our children. They want to do the same thing. They want to protect their house. So I'm not out to attack their house. I'm out there to purge their house. This is the fire of reason. This is the fire of reason. I have to go in and say, look, you have a militant book. Please be honest about that. I can read it right here with you, that you are militant people, but I understand your militant culture comes from oppression, and you feel that God gives you the right to go and destroy your neighbor. Okay, let's look at the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you fight them because they fought you, they'll only fight you again. So I can work with the Muslim mindset without converting them out of Islam, so that they can still be a part of their family and their culture, but they can transform that culture and be honest about their book the same way I am forced to be honest about my book and about Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, my biggest drama is not with the Islamic people themselves. My drama is with the silencing tactics that are going on throughout the media and the government. We are letting thousands, I don't know about America, but here in Australia, we're letting thousands upon thousands of the Muslims in every year. And it's going to get to the point where they are breeding like rabbits. I mean, these politicians aren't thinking what's going to happen 20, 40, 60 years down the track. These people have far more kids than what the average Westerner does. Who do they think they're going to vote for in 20, 40, 60 years' time? They've shown time and time again that they do not want to assimilate into Western culture because they believe that their religion is more dominant than Western culture. But, they still want to come here.
Correct. And here, now we turn it to a political scope. And we recognize the evil. And as a Christian, you are a branch off of a Abrahamic tree. And so I'm going to go past Muhammad, going to go past Jesus Christ, and I'm going to bring this back down to Abraham, who is a branch off Adam's tree. Make sense? So I have to, this strips religion out of the consequence. And I have to deal, this takes religion out of government. And religion, Islam, Judaism, Christianity have no business in politics. So as a human nature, if you want to attack the evil of Islam, you have to keep pounding the fact that religion cannot be part of our politics. We cannot be called an Islamic nation. We cannot be called a Christian nation. We cannot be called a Jewish nation. We are a human nation. We are filled with diversity. We are filled with diversity, and if Islam is out to convert, then it has no business in our political society. We cannot instill Sharia law as a religious, God-fearing law, because God, now I look at this God, when we speak about a perfect God, if I speak about a perfect, there's no such thing. The history, the chronology, Chronos is God of time. So now I'm using all these figures of God throughout history that He has given us that has built our language. So chronology is built on the logic of Chronos, time. Chronos, we just had a movie in America recently about Chronos. He's an evil tyrant. Tier, Tuesdays, we deal with the divisions of cells. If I go in and I say we're going to focus on Islam as our politics, I've broken the body. I have to have the right and the left. Christians have to have as much say in my nation as Islam or Judaism, but they cannot dictate the politics of the nation. Because I have to be able to deal with all the differentiations of man. And if in my right assness, I have to accept them, but I cannot allow them to rule and have tyranny and authority. And this is true throughout the Middle East. Now I can use the signs of the Middle East and say, look, there is no peace there, and we do not want to be the broken factionalism that Islam has proven to be in the Middle East.
It's a bit hard to do that when the public aren't aware of the true nature of Islam. And that's my biggest beef, is like there is no journalism, no media outlet or anything that will come out and tell the truth about this religion. Like me and you can sit there and talk about it, freely, but no one will actually let the general public know that Muhammad was a pedophile, beheaded 800 people from the Banu Qurayza tribe in a single day, started 65 wars, etc., etc. And this is the person that 1.4 billion people on the planet believe to be the perfect example of mankind. If the average Australian knew this fact, which they don't, there's no way we'd be letting 100,000 of the bastards in each year.
Correct.
And that's what my biggest grief is. We have to get people to actually start speaking out about it. Let everybody know. So then we're going to start pressuring the governments to stop them coming in the droves that they are, because they've made it perfectly clear time and time again that they do not want to assimilate. They want to dominate the world through force if necessary. I mean, it's got a 1400-year, 270 million death count to back this statement up.
Right. For myself, what I was forced to do is I realized that diversity was being preached from my own Christian pulpit. It's been very difficult for me to do, but I've had to go and attack the Bible. I've had to attack the perfect image of Jesus Christ. I've had to attack the perfect image of God. In so doing, it brings me back to the trunk of this tree, which is Torah, which was a genocidal book. They were going to go in through their ideology, the Israelites, and they were going to destroy the worship center of Canaan, which was all built up about Enoch. Now, Enoch disappeared because he walked with God. This was a previous age of religion, thousands upon thousands of years ago. Well, 5,000 years ago. I'm Frisian. There was a Frisian of the Asherim before Enoch. So, it's easiest right now because we talk about Western culture. Western culture and Zionism is a huge drama being played out before our eyes, and we can look at the difficulty between Palestine and Israel. Now, if you want us on Islam, look at Palestine can't get peace with Israel. They won't seek it. Somehow, if we can make peace with the Muslims, but make sure our governments are aware, and as individuals make sure that religion does not enter politics. Fight that like crazy. That they can worship, but they had better not show their militant nature in our country because we do not need militarism. So you are a peace activist.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't. My knowledge of the Palestine and the Israel conflict is fairly limited. All I do know is what I've seen on documentaries and things as such. But I do know that I saw the Ross Kemp show, where in Palestine, instead of them having big billboards up with advertisements and pictures of our sporting heroes and such, they got pictures of people that have suicide bombed and marred themselves. They're teaching little kids that Jews are nothing but apes and pigs, you know, from the day they're old enough to speak. So how the hell do you combat that?
First of all, be a peace activist. Talk peace constantly. Even when you speak to the Muslim, realize they are part of the human machine. And grab that desire for peace that is within them. Now, are they a religious zealot? Absolutely. You're dealing with religious zealotry, and you don't want that type of stuff in Australia. How can you combat this? Does everybody have a gun in their house? How can you protect yourself from the terrorist? One of the things that is causing terrorism in the world today is not so much Islam, but European nationalism. And let me describe that. In the middle of the 19th century, Europe went through a time of European nationalism, which is a fancy word for fascism. We wanted the Britons to live in Britain. We wanted the Dutch to live in the Netherlands. We wanted the Germans to live in Germany. Well, unfortunately, in the diaspora, here's the Jews that still had the strong Jewish spirit because they were dispersed throughout the world by whom? By God. It's written totally in that Bible. God took these people, this nation, and He scattered them throughout the earth, but their national spirit wouldn't go away. And so finally, in Germany, you can read a book called 51 Documents, Zionist Collaboration with the Nazis. You have two fascist societies. You have this Jewish culture that does not want to assimilate with the German culture. So at the 18th Zionist Congress, the Jews declare war against Germany because Germany was oppressing the Jews. So here I have the oppressor and the oppressed. And the oppressed say, we're going to destroy the oppressor. Unfortunately, the oppressor destroyed them. We went through the entire Holocaust. Hitler comes out looking very evil, but he was a Christian. So the Jews throughout that period were entering Palestine. Now they go into Palestine, you have these two fascist cultures. Palestine wants to be a state, Israel wants to be a state. We have this friction between these two cultures. We're dealing with friction. Yeah, so let me get back. What was I going?
I strongly disagree when you said that Hitler was a Christian. He was nothing of the sort. A lot of people think he was one of the major antichrists. I mean, he had the swastika as a direct insult to Christianity. He hated the Jews, and he hated Christians because he saw that as nothing more than a byproduct of the Jews, and we all know what he thought of the Jews. He stopped Christianity being taught in German schools.
Right. There are lines of thought that he was a Catholic. Through the entire Reformation period throughout Europe, you do have this hostility between Catholicism and Protestantism. So you have this dividing line between Christianity also. The two are split. So whether he's Christian, Catholic, whatever, it's a religious deal. And you have these Jews who are anxious to create a Jewish homeland. The fallout of that entire period becomes the Nakba. Okay, I had lost my train of thought. That brings us back to this. 1948, as a fallout of the Holocaust, we reward Israel for the tragedy that is dealt with Zionism. We reward them with giving them the land of Israel in the Nakba. It's a UN resolution, and they go in and they take this place of land, what is considered Muslim territory at that point. The world looks at this and says, there was no nation of Palestine, but now Islam is enraged because the militant nature of the Second World War and of fascism suddenly created this little sliver of land, which is a byproduct of European nationalism. Now we have our sights on the Middle East. God is still in control. God is changing that entire region, and He's changing the psychology of humankind. And you are dealing with this in Australia as you're seeing a very real danger of a lot of these places becoming a Muslim land. I'm dealing with a Christian land here in America that is totally militant in nature. I can only challenge this as a peace activist and not as a religious man. Although I don't quit my religion, because I have to discern the Bible, the books that were given to us that shows and prophesies all this cell division. So now I can't say, well, they're militant, they're not really a Christian, and I go to the Muslim nation and say, look, I'm going to confess the sins of the Christian house, and I want you to learn the sins of the Muslim house by showing you the sins of the Christian house. And I'm not a perfect man either, but I desire for peace, and I know that you do too. But then in politics,
everyone who's actually sane does.
Correct.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Rick. It's 1:30 in the morning over here.
All right. But that addresses those suicide bombers, is the human desire for peace. And then you look at that and you say, you think you're going to heaven as a suicide bomber? Think again. That's
I think they're going to go to heaven and get
theology I can understand.
Yeah, they think they're going to go to heaven and get their 72 virgins or whatever, but they're not. They're going to go to hell. And there's no virgins in hell. There's nothing but sluts, like my ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, right. You know what? I'll only respond to that by saying, just like we have that knowledge of good and evil and that fruit off that tree, we're living in a heaven and hell. And I will say, you know what? We all go through this psychology, and if we release this idea of the heaven and hell, then we can deal with the reality that we're dealing with on earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I might get onto your that page that the moderator sent me the link to.
Yeah, I sent that over to you. Correct. Yeah, that I go through the entire Bible annually and discern the scriptures and go through the deciphering of all the words and everything God wrote for us that describes this entire scenario that we're dealing with today. So, take a look.
I did see something about the Old Testament. Like I said, I've watched lots of documentaries about this sort of stuff, and it was saying that all the evil that happened in, the Canaanite, for example, weren't they the offspring of, or the bloodline, the offspring of the fallen angels, so they were all inherently evil, like truly evil?
You know what that is? The books of Enoch. And the books of Enoch, these angels from heaven, which Azazel, who is sacrificed to by Israel, but Azazel is the goat demon. And whether or not those stories were true, this is so far back in history we can't record it.
Yeah.
What there is, though, is a story. And history shows here's these righteous angels come down to earth, and your whole story of Nephilim and everything else, I will write all that in as eventually, and where we are today, in the reality of contemporary society, we deal with the allegories of all those historical stories, and now we can address contemporary culture in the reality of our existence, instead of imagining the whole spiritual nature in something beyond what we can see in our day-to-day lives. So.
Yeah, right. All right, mate. All right. Well, it was really nice meeting you, Rick.
Nice meeting you. Appreciated the conversation.
Yeah, I will have a look at your Facebook page tomorrow, mate. I appreciate the conversation. I'll see you later.
Thank you much. Yeah, 1 Year Bible Blogging on Facebook.